The space station buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy moved through its corridors. Commander Zexter of the Maltirian Empire stood tall among the crowd, his 6-foot frame imposing even by galactic standards. His purple scales caught the artificial light as he surveyed the mixed population of traders, diplomats, and civilians that filled the commercial district of Nexus Station. The Maltirians had recently joined the Galactic Federation, bringing with them a reputation for military excellence that had crushed 3 neighboring systems in brutal campaigns. Their warrior culture valued strength above all else, and Zexter embodied this perfectly. His chest bore the crimson insignia of the Imperial Guard, and the plasma rifle across his back marked him as one of their elite soldiers. As he walked through the station's main plaza, lesser beings moved aside respectfully. The small, gray Xanthari whispered nervously among themselves. Even the proud Kellian merchants, usually arrogant in their dealings, kept their distance. Zexter enjoyed the fear his presence commanded. It was the natural order of things. That's when he noticed the human. The old man sat alone on a bench near the central fountain, feeding what appeared to be some kind of small, winged creatures that had gathered around him. His hair was white as starlight, his face lined with age, and his clothes were simple, nothing that marked him as important or dangerous. Just another elderly human, one of those soft creatures that had somehow convinced the galaxy they belonged among the stars. Zexter had heard stories about humans. Of course, they were new to galactic society, having only made first contact 50 years ago. Most species regarded them with curiosity rather than respect. They were physically weak, lived short lives, and seemed to lack the natural weapons or armor that marked true warriors. Yet somehow, they had earned a place in the Federation through what others called diplomacy, a concept Zexter found weak and distasteful. The Maltirian commander changed his path, moving closer to observe this specimen. The old human continued his quiet activity, completely unaware of the predator approaching. Several of the small creatures, Zexter recognized them now as Nexus doves, a local species, perched on the man's shoulders and arms as he scattered small seeds from a pouch. "How touching," Zexter said, his voice carrying the harsh tones of his native language mixed with galactic standard. "The soft human plays with his pets." The old man looked up, his blue eyes meeting Zexter's yellow gaze without flinching. "They're not pets," he said mildly, his voice carrying a slight accent that marked him as coming from one of Earth's northern regions. "Just hungry creatures looking for kindness." Zexter laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Kindness. How very human. In my culture, we would eat such creatures, not waste food on them." "Different cultures, different values," the old man replied, returning to his feeding. "The universe is big enough for both approaches." The dismissal infuriated Zexter. How dare this weak creature ignore him? On Maltiria, such disrespect would mean immediate death. The commander stepped closer, his heavy boots echoing on the metal deck plating. "You should show more respect when a Maltirian warrior speaks to you, old man. Perhaps your kind doesn't understand hierarchy, but I am Commander Zexter of the Imperial Guard. I have conquered worlds." The human continued his feeding, though Zexter noticed the man's shoulders had tensed slightly. Good. Fear was beginning to set in. "I'm sure that's very impressive," the old man said without looking up. "Conquest requires strength and determination. Your people must be proud of their achievements." Again, the mild response instead of the cowering Zexter expected. This human was either very brave or very stupid. The commander decided to test which. "Stand when I address you," Zexter commanded, his hand moving to rest on the plasma pistol at his hip. "Your Federation membership does not protect you from learning proper manners." Now the old man did look up, and something in his eyes made Zexter pause momentarily. There was no fear there, only a calm assessment that seemed somehow familiar. It was the look of someone measuring an opponent, though that was impossible. This was just a frail human civilian. "I prefer to sit, thank you," the man said politely. "These old bones don't handle standing as well as they used to." The casual defiance broke whatever restraint Zexter had been maintaining. With a snarl of rage, he stepped forward and backhanded the old man across the face with his scaled hand. The blow powerful enough to split a Zenthri's skull, the sound echoed through the plaza like a gunshot. Conversation stopped. Beings turned to stare. The Nexus doves scattered in alarm, their small cries filling the sudden silence. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The old man's head had snapped to the side from the impact, and a thin line of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. Zexler stood over him, breathing heavily, waiting for the inevitable collapse, the begging for mercy. The proper submission his strike should have produced, instead? The old man slowly turned his head back, wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand, and looked directly at Zexler with those unsettling blue eyes. "That was a mistake," he said quietly. Zexler laughed, though something cold was beginning to form in his stomach. "A mistake? Old man, I could kill you with my bare hands. What could you possibly do to—" He never finished the sentence. The old man moved faster than should have been possible for someone his age, faster than Zexler's enhanced reflexes could track. One moment he was sitting peacefully on the bench. The next his hand had closed around Zexler's wrist in a grip that felt like a fusion. Clamp. Pain shot up the Maltirian's arm as bones ground together under impossible pressure. His thick scales, evolved to stop projectile weapons, might as well have been silk. The grip tightened, and Zexler felt his wrist bones begin to crack. "What?" he gasped. But the old man wasn't finished. With casual ease that defied every law of physics Zexler knew, the human stood up, maintaining his grip on the commander's wrist. As he rose, he twisted slightly, and Zexler found himself spinning through the air. The galaxy's gravity seemed to shift around him as his feet left the deck. He hit the ground hard, his armor clattering against the metal plating. The impact drove the breath from his lungs. But before he could recover, the old man was there, one foot planted firmly on Zexler's chest, pressing down with enough force to crack ribs. "Stay down," the human said, his voice still mild but carrying an undertone of absolute authority. "This doesn't need to get worse." Zexler tried to rise, his warrior training demanding he fight back, but the foot on his chest might as well have been a mountain. Worse, the old man had somehow moved his other foot to pin Zexler's gun hand to the deck. Every attempt to move only brought fresh pain as pressure points Zexler didn't know he had sent agony shooting through his nervous system. "Impossible," Zexler wheezed. "You're human. You're weak. Your kind are peaceful." A sad smile crossed the old man's weathered features. "Peaceful, yes, when we can be. But weak?" He shook his head slowly. "Son, you have no idea what humans are capable of when we need to be strong." Around them, the plaza had erupted into chaos. Beings were running, calling for station security, recording everything on their communication devices. But none dared approach the two figures at the center of the disturbance. "Please," Zexler found himself saying, the words torn from his throat against his will. "I yield. I yield." The old man studied him for a long moment, those blue eyes seeming to see straight through to his soul. "Do you, or will you attack again the moment I let you up?" "I yield," Zexler repeated, hating himself for the words but unable to deny the reality of his situation. "By the warrior's code of my people, I acknowledge your victory." "Good," the human said, and stepped back, releasing the pressure that had held the Maltirian commander helpless. "Now, let's try this again. I'm Thomas Chen, formerly Gunnery Sergeant, Earth Marine Corps, and you are?" Zexler slowly sat up, cradling his injured wrist and trying to process what had just happened. "Commander Zexler," he said automatically, then caught himself. "But how? Your species isn't supposed to have that kind of strength." Your intelligence reports were probably accurate for most of my people," Thomas said, settling back onto his bench as if nothing had happened. The Nexus doves were already beginning to return, apparently recognizing that the danger had passed. But they might have missed a few details about human military training. Specifically, the kind of training that takes place on planets with gravity 3 times galactic standard. The old Marine began scattering seeds again, his movements calm and controlled. "You see, Commander, humans adapt. It's what we do. Put us on a high-gravity world, train us there for 20 years, and we become something a little different than what your analysts expected. Zexler struggled to his feet, his pride in ruins but his mind racing. You're a soldier. Was, Thomas corrected. Retired now. 40 years of service, most of it in places that would make your conquered worlds look like vacation spots. He looked up at the Maltirian with those unnervingly calm eyes. But once a Marine, always a Marine. We don't forget our training just because we get old. Station security was finally approaching, their weapons drawn but uncertain how to proceed. The sight of a Maltirian Imperial Guard commander on the ground being lectured by a word of the incident spread through Nexus Station faster than a quantum transmission. Within hours, every being on the station had heard some version of the story. A Maltirian Imperial Guard commander brought to his knees by an elderly human. The details varied wildly depending on who told the tale, but the core remained constant. The impossible had happened. Zexler found himself in an uncomfortable position. His own people would demand an explanation for his public humiliation, while other species watched him with a mixture of curiosity and newfound wariness. The human, Thomas Chun, had simply disappeared into the civilian quarters after their encounter, leaving the Maltirian commander to deal with the aftermath alone. 3 hours after the incident, Zexler received a priority communication from his ship. Sub-Commander Vexahal's image appeared on his personal display, the younger Maltirian's expression carefully neutral. "Commander," Vexahal said, his voice carrying the formal tones required when addressing a superior. "The crew is requesting clarification regarding reports from the station." Zexler studied his subordinate's face, reading the unspoken questions there. Vexahal had served under him for 6 years, had seen him defeat Kellian berserkers in single combat and break Xanthari battle formations with his tactical brilliance. The idea that their commander could be defeated by a lone human civilian defied everything they understood about their leader. "The reports are accurate," Zexler said finally. "I was defeated in unarmed combat by a human male." Vexahal's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. "Sir, perhaps there were circumstances, weapons, allies, some form of technology." "No," Zexler cut him off. "One elderly human. No weapons. No assistance. He defeated me as easily as I might defeat a child." The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Vexahal found his voice again. "Sir, how is that possible?" "Our intelligence reports on human physiology clearly indicate our intelligence reports are incomplete," Zexler said sharply. "Summon the senior staff. We need to discuss what this means for our understanding of humanity." After ending the communication, Zexler sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the stars beyond the station's viewport. His wrist had been treated by the station's medical facility, a hairline fracture that would heal in a few days. But the damage to his understanding of the galaxy's power structure would take much longer to repair. A chime at his door interrupted his brooding. "Enter," he called, expecting Vexahal or one of his other officers. Instead, Thomas Chen walked in, moving with the same quiet confidence he displayed during their encounter. The old human had changed clothes, trading his simple civilian wear for what appeared to be a formal outfit, dark blue with subtle, military-style cut that somehow managed to look both dignified and practical. "Commander," Thomas said, nodding respectfully. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I thought we should talk." Zexler stood automatically, his military training demanding formality despite the circumstances. "Mr. Chun, or should I address you by your military rank?" "Thomas is fine," the human replied, settling into the chair across from Zexler's desk without invitation. "May I?" The casual presumption would have infuriated Zexler hours earlier. Now he simply nodded and sat back down. "What can I do for you, Thomas?" "I wanted to apologize," Thomas said, his blue eyes serious. "What happened in the plaza, I could have handled it differently. Less publicly with less damage to your reputation." Zexler blinked in surprise. Of all the things he'd expected the human to say, an apology wasn't among them. "You're apologizing to me?" "I struck you first." Yes, you did, Thomas agreed calmly. And I responded with exactly as much force as necessary to end the threat. But I've been thinking about it, and I realize I might have been showing off a little. 40 years of retirement, and I still like to remind people that I'm not completely harmless. Showing off, Zexler repeated slowly. That was you showing off? Thomas smiled, and for the first time since meeting him, Zexler saw genuine warmth in the expression. Commander, if I'd wanted to seriously hurt you, you'd still be in the medical bay. What you experienced was just enough pressure to make you stop fighting and listen. Standard crowd control technique? Adapted for species with different pain responses. The casual mention of adapting techniques for different species sent another chill through Zexler's understanding. How many species have you fought? Personally? None until today, Thomas said. But I've read the files. After first contact, our military spent a lot of time studying potential threats. We know how to fight Kellions, Zenthari, Vorthok, even your people. It's just information gathering, the same thing every military does, but you've never had to use this knowledge? Thomas leaned back in his chair, his expression growing distant. The thing about humans, Commander, is that we study war so we don't have to fight it. We prepare for conflicts we hope never to have. When we joined the Federation, we came as friends, but we came prepared to defend ourselves if friendship wasn't enough. Zexler processed this information, fitting it into his new understanding of human nature. Your entire species approaches conflict this way? Not everyone, Thomas admitted. Most humans really are as peaceful as your reports suggested. But some of us spent our lives learning how to fight, and we don't forget those lessons just because we prefer diplomacy. He paused, studying Zexler's face. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? It was a fair question, and one Zexler had been struggling with since their encounter. I don't know, he said honestly. My people respect strength above all else. Learning that we've underestimated an entire species changes everything. Does it have to? Thomas asked. Your people are strong warriors that hasn't changed? The galaxy is big enough for different kinds of strength to coexist. Before Zexler could respond, his door chimed again. This time it was Vexahal, his young face tight with barely controlled emotion. Commander, Vexahal said, then stopped as he noticed Thomas. His hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm. At ease, Sub-Commander, Zexler said quickly. Mr. Chun is here as my guest. Vexahal's confusion was obvious, but he managed to keep his voice level. Sir, the senior staff is assembled as requested. They're waiting for your briefing. Zexler looked at Thomas, who stood smoothly. I should let you get to your meeting, the human said. But, Commander, when you brief your people, remember that understanding leads to respect, not fear. Wait, Zexler said as Thomas moved toward the door. My officers will have questions I can't answer. About human military capabilities, about what other surprises we might encounter. Thomas paused, considering. What if I attended your briefing? Answered those questions directly? Vexahal made a small sound of protest, quickly stifled when Zexler glared at him. You would do that? Zexler asked. Share intelligence about your species with potential enemies? Are you enemies? Thomas asked mildly. Last I checked, Malteria was a Federation member. We're allies, Commander. It's time we started acting like it. 20 minutes later. The senior staff of the Malterian cruiser Blade of Conquest sat around their briefing table, staring in fascination and growing alarm at the elderly human, who had just finished explaining how Earth's military prepared for galactic warfare, ship's intelligence officer. Kexmara was the first to find her voice. You're saying that human soldiers train on worlds with triple standard gravity. Some do, Thomas confirmed. Heavy worlders, we call them. Specifically designed for combat operations in hostile environments. High gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme temperatures, whatever the mission requires. How many such soldiers does Earth maintain? Asked Chief Tactical Officer Dexron, his scarred face grim with professional interest. That's classified, Thomas said with a smile. But I can tell you that every human ship in the Federation fleet has at least one heavy worlder among the crew. Just in case. Vexahol leaned forward, his young face intense. The human we encountered earlier today, was he typical of these heavy world soldiers? Thomas here is retired, Zexter interjected, still struggling to reconcile the mild-mannered man beside him with the force that had dominated him so completely. But he was kind enough to demonstrate that human military training has some aspects our intelligence missed. Retired 40 years, Thomas added. And I was never the strongest or fastest of my unit. Average, really. The galaxy's a big place, and humans adapt to fill whatever role needs filling. The implications hung heavy in the air. If Thomas was average among human heavy worlders, what did that say about their elite units? What about active duty soldiers with 40 years less wear on their bodies? Navigation Officer Lexander spoke up, his voice thoughtful. This changes our tactical assessment significantly. If humans are capable of individual combat performance at this level, their fleet combat capabilities might be equally underestimated. Now you're thinking strategically, Thomas said approvingly. But remember, just because we can fight doesn't mean we want to. Humans joined the Federation because we believe in cooperation, not conquest. But if cooperation failed? Dexron pressed. Thomas's expression grew serious. Then you'd discover why humans have been fighting wars for 10,000 years and only stopped recently. He paused, looking around the table at their faces. The same reason Maltirians. 6 months after the incident on Nexus Station, the ripple effects of Zexler's encounter with Thomas Chun had spread throughout the galaxy like waves from a dropped stone. What had started as a simple confrontation between two individuals had grown into something that threatened to reshape the Federation's entire power structure. The Maltirian Empire's High Command had initially dismissed Zexler's report as impossible. Commander Zexler was one of their finest officers, a veteran of countless campaigns, decorated for valor in 7 major conflicts. The idea that he could be defeated by an elderly human seemed absurd on its face. That skepticism lasted exactly 3 days. High Admiral Morthok, Supreme Commander of the Maltirian Fleet, had ordered a comprehensive intelligence review of human military capabilities. What they discovered in those classified Federation databases made the Empire's War Council question everything they thought they knew about galactic politics. Humans hadn't just joined the Federation as peaceful diplomats. They had come prepared for war on a scale that dwarfed anything the galaxy had seen since the ancient Vorthic conquests. Their exploration ships carried enough firepower to level planets. Their research stations were fortress worlds that could withstand siege warfare. And their military personnel, hidden among civilian populations throughout Federation space, represented a fighting force that made the Empire's legions look like children playing with toy weapons. Now, Admiral Morthok stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Blade, watching a human vessel approach through the viewport. The ship was elegant in the way that human designs tended to be, smooth curves instead of angular armor. Aesthetic beauty combined with functional purpose. It looked like a pleasure yacht compared to the brutal efficiency of Maltirian warships. It was also, according to their scans, carrying enough weaponry to destroy his entire battle group. Admiral, his communications officer reported. The human vessel is requesting permission to come aboard. They're sending diplomatic credentials. Morthok studied the approaching ship with professional interest. Who are they sending? The request is signed by Admiral Sarah Hassan, Earth Defense Command, and ... The officer paused, checking his display again. Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Chun, retired. The bridge fell silent. Every officer present had heard the story of Nexus Station by now. The human who had single-handedly humiliated one of their best commanders was coming to meet with them personally. Permission granted, Morthok said finally. Full diplomatic honors. An hour later, Admiral Morthok found himself face-to-face with the most dangerous humans in the galaxy. And they looked nothing like what he'd expected. Admiral Hassan was a small woman with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes, wearing a simple blue uniform with minimal decoration. She looked like someone's grandmother, not the commander of humanity's military forces. Beside her, Thomas Chun appeared exactly as Zexler had described, an elderly man who could have been any civilian in any spaceport in the galaxy. Admiral Morthak, Hassan said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I believe we have some things to discuss. Morthak accepted the handshake, noting the surprising firmness of her grip. Admiral Hassan, Mr. Chun, I confess your request for this meeting was unexpected. I imagine it was, Thomas said, settling into the chair they'd provided with the same casual ease he'd shown everywhere else. But after what happened on Nexus Station, it seemed like we should have a conversation about expectations. Expectations, Morthak repeated, taking his own seat across the conference table from them. His senior staff flanked him, while the humans had come alone. The imbalance should have made him feel secure. Instead, it made him nervous. The galaxy is at a crossroads, Admiral Hassan said, her tone conversational but her eyes serious. For 50 years, we've maintained a balance based on mutual respect and cooperation. Recent events suggest that balance might be shifting. Commander Zexler, who sat at Morthak's right hand, spoke up. Admiral, my encounter with Mr. Chun has raised questions about human capabilities that our intelligence services couldn't answer. We've discovered significant gaps in our understanding. I imagine you have, Thomas said with a slight smile. The question is what you plan to do with your new understanding. Morthak leaned forward, studying the two humans across from him. Mr. Chun, my commander tells me you defeated him in single combat with minimal effort. Is this representative of human combat capability? That's a complicated question, Thomas replied. Am I stronger and faster than most humans? Yes. Am I stronger and faster than your average Maltirian warrior? Also yes. Does that make me representative? Not really. Admiral Hassan activated a small holographic projector, filling the space above the table with star charts. Admiral Morthak, what do you know about Earth's military doctrine? We know you maintain significant defensive forces, Morthak answered carefully. Our intelligence suggests these forces are larger and more capable than initially reported. Much larger, Hassan confirmed, manipulating the display to show troop deployments across Federation space. Earth maintains active military personnel on every inhabited world in Federation territory. We call it the Guardian Program. Officially, they're cultural attaches, trade representatives, and civilian contractors. Unofficially, they're the reason no Federation world has faced successful invasion in 50 years. The numbers appearing on the holographic display made Morthak's tactical computer officer whistle in amazement. These deployment numbers. Admiral, you're describing a military presence of over 200 million active personnel. 237,400,612. As of last month, Hassan said precisely. Each trained to the standards Mr. Chun demonstrated on Nexus Station. Each prepared to defend Federation worlds as if they were Earth itself. Zexler leaned forward, his scarred face intent. Admiral, are you threatening us? Quite the opposite, Thomas said, his voice mild. We're explaining why threats aren't necessary. The Federation works because everyone benefits from cooperation. War only makes sense when cooperation fails. But cooperation requires trust, Admiral Hassan added, and trust requires honesty. We've been less than completely honest about our capabilities, and that's created dangerous misunderstandings. Morthak absorbed this information, his strategic mind racing through implications. What kind of honesty are you proposing? Hassan manipulated the hologram again, and suddenly the display showed detailed technical specifications for human military hardware. Ship designs, weapon capabilities, defensive systems, enough information to plan either an invasion or a defense. Complete transparency, she said. No more hidden capabilities, no more pleasant fictions about human weakness. We're showing you exactly what we are, Admiral. The question is whether that makes us friends or enemies. The Maltirian Admiral stared at the specifications floating in front of him, recognizing weapon systems that could crack planets and defensive, technologies that made Maltirian armor look like tissue paper. This wasn't just superior technology, it was advancement, on a scale that suggested humans had been preparing for galactic warfare since before they met the first alien species. This level of military development, Morthic said slowly, it represents decades of work. You were preparing for war before you knew we existed. We were preparing for the possibility of war, Thomas corrected. It's what humans do. We hope for the best and prepare for the worst. When we found the Federation, we discovered the best, a galaxy full of diverse species working together peacefully. But we didn't stop preparing for the worst, just in case. In case of what? Zexler asked. In case someone decided that cooperation wasn't enough, Admiral Hassan replied. In case someone decided that conquest was easier than diplomacy. In case someone looked at humanity and saw weakness instead of choice. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Morthic realized he was looking at the true face of human military doctrine, not the aggressive expansionism of the Maltirians or the defensive isolationism of the Xanthari, but something more subtle and infinitely more dangerous. Humans had built their entire military around the concept of peace through overwhelming preparedness. What do you want from us? Morthak asked finally. Partnership, Hassan said simply. Real partnership, based on honest assessment of capabilities and mutual respect for what each species brings to the Federation. The Maltirian Empire has produced some of the finest warriors in the galaxy. Earth has produced some of the most advanced military technology. Together, we could ensure that the Federation remains strong enough to protect itself from any threat. Thomas leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Admiral, your people value strength above all else. We respect that. But we define strength differently. For Maltirians, strength means the ability to conquer. For humans, strength means the ability to protect. The Federation needs both kinds of strength, Hassan added. Protectors and warriors, diplomats and soldiers, builders and defenders. The galaxy is too big and too dangerous for any one approach to work alone. Morthak looked around the table at his officers, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their faces. Everything they'd believed about galactic power structures was wrong. Humans weren't.